Hello, everyone. We're gonna just carry on a little bit early. I do have my little pre-show start thing for last minute stuff. But anyways, let's get right into it. And where is my dual camera? What we are working on today is some more Zamo the Destroyer with the Secret Basement Lab. Here's my little streaming schedule flyer that I like having at the beginning for anyone who wants to see it. This is what we did last week. So, I'm going to have a couple more things. So, first of all, let's start with, excuse me, sorry about coughing. Let's see if we can get this a little bit closer. Oh yeah, it would help if I flipped cameras. Still getting used to the whole studio mode thing here on OBS. So this is the diagram of where Zamo and Georgie live. Now Georgie is the pet human. Georgie has a split level house. It's based off of one that my aunt and uncle had in Richmond, BC, which is a suburb of Vancouver. And so we see the rec room is Georgie's painting studio. This area is underneath is a crawl space that's probably about 4 feet high underneath the living room, dining room, and kitchen. And then you had the split level stairs, and the next level would be the bedrooms and whatnot. Anyways, so we have where Zamo has commandeered most of this crawl space. Zamo did leave a little corner for Georgie and Georgie's storage. But now we are going to see, I'm going to actually get out of studio mode so I can see a little bigger here myself. Well, we're going to see some views in other areas. Now, last time we saw this hydroponics treat farm, and we also drew the entryway, so this sign would be right here. And this week, we're going to do a couple more drawings. I have like 3 more drawings with the underdrawing, but it's hard to say how long it's going to take to do, especially one of them is going to be fairly detailed. Actually, a couple of them are. So let's move on. What it says here, squirrel brainwashing station. So Zamo, we can see Zamo down there. That is a cartoon of Zamo grinning. Zamo is an iguana who talks and whatnot and dreams of taking over the world, starting with the neighborhood. So Zamo was one of the hobbies of this particular strange iguana. Just gonna move a cord out of the way so it's not casting a shadow. As Zamo was trying to basically build up an army, a private army, somewhat with frogs, because Zamo's main minion is a bullfrog named Hoppy. But Zamo also was going around, that there is the hydroponic berry station we drew last week. But Zamo was also going around and doing things like trying to brainwash squirrels. So that's what we're going to draw first up today. And then we'll see how far we get with the other ones. Just going to try and get that sort of even. But there we go. And what we were working with is our friend India Ink. I tend to use the Demco stuff. I used Speedball Super Black for years. So, you know, if that's what you've got and that's what you like, go for it. Anyways, and then I've got some dip pens with various nibs. Now, people who, regular viewers who may have seen my last couple streams earlier this week may have noticed I was complaining I've been having some nib issues. But anyways, this one is my favorite nib, and I finally, you know, had a good look at it. It's a 513 EF Hunt, which I think Speedball now owns, or Speedball at least sells Hunt nibs. So I found a source online, because I think this one's getting old and maybe kind of a little worn out or whatever. I found a source online, so I ordered a box of 12 of these. That should come later this month, and I am looking forward to that, because this is my favorite nib for ages. So anyways, we're going to do the usual thing I do with liquid ink, top left down to bottom right. I'm not too worried about going over, because I'm probably going to crop out this I'm pointing at something that's out of camera, but in the berry farm, I'm envisioning a whole like stack of these grow lights with crops. So, but I didn't draw, I only drew the light for the bottom one, and realistically that's going to get cropped out. So I'm not too worried if I end up going a little over, is what that's about. So let's get right into it, finally. So Zamo, I envisioned having all sorts of electronics and whatnot. You know, it is a secret basement lab, and Zamo's somewhat of a, I don't want to say mad scientist, but questionable one. Let's put it that way, questionable. And anyways, so Zamo has all sorts of gear that has been acquired through me, which means we don't know. We find out a little bit more about Zamo and Zamo's family after I finished up. See, this was my original webcomic that I started in 2006. And I was doing it, well, regularly until 2008, and then it kind of started to peter out. There were only like 3 or 4 in 2009, I think. So, but then, you know, a couple months ago on here, I was inking a project which was a 2013 reboot that I had planned but never followed through on. In 2014, I kind of redid Zamo the Destroyer as a podcast, in which Zamo would be basically recording the podcast for friends and family back home in Colombia, you know, fellow iguanas, to listen to, and that was the premise of the show. And therefore, in that, we learned a lot more about Zamo's, you know, family and crazy relatives and all this, and, you know, things like, or characters like Cousin Sticky. Cousin Sticky is Zamo's cousin, whose pet human is like a biker of some sort, or possibly a drug dealer, I don't know. You know, Sticky probably pleads the fifth. But Sticky would send care packages to Zamo that had, you know, all sorts of things Zamo wasn't supposed to have, you know, tasers and other items that are illegal in Canada. So it's possible that Sticky sent Zamo a whole bunch of this gear, or some of it. I mean, like right now I'm drawing an oscilloscope. Some of what I was inspired by when I was drawing these cartoons was actually stuff like, my dad is a tinkerer, and his garage is full of all sorts of strange items and, you know, stuff that probably didn't work anymore, but he didn't want to get rid of it, you know. And he's kind of a pack rat, some would say hoarder. And he's also a retired electrician, and he had an interest not just in electrical, like rewiring houses, but he also had an interest in, like, you know, circuit boards and electronics and stuff, and old computers. Like, he has a TRS-80 and he refuses to get rid of that thing, even though it hasn't been turned on in, you know, 30 years. Actually probably closer to 40 now. But he, you know, he has, even now in his place, he's got a little workshop. Well, he's got a little workshop in the house, and then he has the entire garage, which is a workshop, and there's all sorts of weird stuff out there and old gear and whatnot. So he does have an oscilloscope. Anyways, so some of the stuff with like random knobs and whatnot, I didn't go into my dad's workshop for reference, but I used kind of memory from as a kid. You know, his office looked a little bit like a mad scientist lab in some ways. And also I have a background, not that I've done anything with it in a long, long time, but I do have a background in audio engineering. So, like, I'm familiar with, you know, tape, you know, 24-track tape recorders and all the effects pedals for one thing, but then like rack gear, audio compressors and all that sort of stuff with knobs and whatnot. So, and dials, all kind of stuff. And kind of Not that I really got too much into the technical aspect of it. I mean, I probably should have, but I didn't. But things like the vintage gear, compressors like the LA2A and stuff like that. So I do have some random bits of old audio gear. Actually, what I probably have most of in terms of old stuff is like Yamaha drum machines. I think I have like 4 of them from the 1980s or early 90s of different models and stuff like that. So, I can kind of relate. Anyways, Zamo has all these sorts of things. And I watch science documentaries, but I'm not going to pretend to be a scientist, so I have no idea what any of this crap does that Zamo has. But in some ways, that kind of makes it more fun, right? Because then you're picking things for aesthetics. And also, Zamo claims to be a postdoctorate anthropologist, although Zamo's idea of anthropology is a little questionable. I guess they teach things differently down at the Iguanid University of the Jungle, the IUJ, Zamo's alma mater. But anyways, it's kind of fun to envision where Zamo is claiming to be an anthropologist, but actually just kind of plain mad scientist down in the basement. Anywho, so I'm going to draw all these wires. And yeah, so Zamo's got those little skull cappy brain, I don't know what they're called, but like sort of electrodes measuring brain activity on this squirrel. And also you'll see Zamo is trying to hypnotize the squirrel. The better to brainwash the squirrel into pledging allegiance to Zamo and doing Zamo's bidding, which would certainly be an improvement from what the squirrels at my house do, which is to plant hazelnuts in my yard and try and screw up my garden. Like, I don't mind hazelnuts, okay, but I buy them in the store, and you quickly form a thicket if you're not, constantly ripping them out. So they would completely take over my yard if I let them. They also plant peanuts, but the peanuts I don't think are really all that hardy here, so, whatever. That I don't care about as much. I think Zamo's research has found that the squirrels, because their brains are so small, they are kind of vulnerable and susceptible to hypnotism, but they don't retain anything you tell them. So they're kind of useless as far as, as far as that sort of thing goes. So let me draw a couple more random wires. Obviously, we've just got the 5 shown in the front, but I have some audio gear where it has a certain number of connections in the front and then the rest go into the back of the box. So we can assume that there's something kind of similar here. If you've ever had the misfortune of experiencing an in-lab sleep study, mind you, they don't really use the cap. They kind of stick these things right to your scalp. And then you have like this weird umbilical cord of stuff that gets tangled up with you and is somehow supposed to be not at all stopping you from sleeping properly, which is, of course, utter bullshit. Anywho. Frankly, I think the whole thing's a scam just to sell CPAP machines, and there are better ways to deal with sleep apnea. But anyways, that's a whole other rant that we don't really need to get into. Zamo did helpfully provide a headrest for the squirrel. Not that it really matters, because they kind of sit upright, right? And obviously we'll do the other half of his brain when we come over, but I kind of want to work this way as well. So I guess what we got to do is kind of start drawing in the fuzzy tail, right? This is going to look a little bit messy for sure. I may kind of thicken up some of these wires as we go so that they don't get lost in the fuzzy tail. Actually, that would probably be a great thing to try with a crow quill. I think I said on Monday, no, it was last night's stream, I was trying to use one. I kind of admitted I do not have much experience with crow quills, and frankly, I find them annoying, but I did manage to get some lines going, so we'll kind of see how this goes. Oh, well, now it's behaving. I think the trick with these is just go super light and dip regularly, even though they say that supposedly because it's got a tube that you should be able to not have to dip constantly, but I find otherwise. So anyways, and that also helps show, like, obviously this is thicker, but the difference in line weight helps to differentiate between what you're doing in the background, i.e. the squirrel's tail, and what you're doing in the foreground, i.e. the wires going to the squirrel's brain, and other details as we get going. I'll just sort of say, I know as I'm looking down, you kind of see the top of my head a bunch, but one of these days, I was trying to actually set up a web camera that would be kind of more a sideways view, but didn't want to work with my laptop. Anyways, so at some point in the future, we'll get there. And oh, and the other thing, I don't know if it shows up on camera, but if you see like sparkles or whatnot, one of the things I was doing this afternoon is I'm on the events and hospitality committee at my church, and we've got an event coming up this weekend. So I was decorating our photo booth for the kiddos. I grabbed some of that glitter tool that they have at Michael's to put on the photo booth. I didn't even think about, like, oh yeah, Michael's glitter tool. It's not really well glittered. And whatever glitter is on there doesn't hold on well. So I'm like tying this thing up above my head and it's just raining gold glitter. I'm like, oh, great. I have to be very careful washing my face later because I don't want to end up with a bunch of it getting into my eyes because that sucks. But I kind of carefully wiped away from my eyes and got most of it off my face, but I do kind of look like I've been at a rave or dance party or something like that. Okay. The crow quill is now starting to behave, at least this particular one. We will come in with that other nib to kind of fatten up the outline as well. I guess you would still have some hair on their faces, although you don't really think of it. I think the hair is so on the face is so short that it's kind of, I think I have finally broken the crow quill code. Try saying that multiple times quickly, because I always had trouble getting these things to write before or draw, and now I'm mostly getting them to go. I did do a little bit of Googling, and somebody was saying on somewhere on Reddit or whatnot that, like, oh, crow quills initially that they have some sort of a coating, like an oil that you have to kind of soak off of them. So initially that they may not write as well as after you've used them a few times. So I don't know, maybe that's it. But those are really fine lines. Maybe I'll lift that up a little. Just a touch. Because that way we can kind of get the whole thing in. This is supposed to be smooth Bristol board, but this nib is definitely catching on it a little bit. I just realized the squirrel was supposed to have ears in there, but I forgot to draw them, so we'll assume that the ears have been squished in underneath the brain electrode cap. You know, Zamo's an iguana and they have tympanic membranes. So Zamo wouldn't necessarily think about ears or care about them. Zamo's attitude would be, well, that's your own, if they're uncomfortable, that's your own fault for having them. Iguanas have tympanic membranes, they're flat against the head. They don't interfere with caps and things like that. So let's go in and kind of scratch in some of the background, and that'll make the tail pop out a little bit. We'll use this thicker nib. I mean, it's not hugely thicker, but slightly thicker nib to draw in some fur, and that also helps kind of give a little sense of the shadow and the form of the squirrel. This, as drawn, is about 6 by 9. It will end up probably being a fair bit smaller than that when it's after it's scanned and put into the layout of the book. I was actually thinking earlier, like in the initial run as a comic, there's the occasional comic where Zamo's usually hanging out right by the door of the secret basement lab and refusing to come out or refusing to let people in. So we see it, but we don't see a lot of it. Though, for anyone who might be new, the plan is to do a comic omnibus. So all 100 and some odd of the original Zamo the Destroyer comics. And then from later on, when I started to do Zamo as a podcast, then I've got scripts for pretty much all of those, and I can I will transform those scripts also into books and add illustrations and whatnot. Point is, the during the comic run, like there was some mention of the secret basement lab, but very little, whereas it was kind of a much bigger part of things when it was a podcast. So I don't know. I'm doing these drawings of the secret basement lab like last week, this week, and possibly next week. But will it actually end up in the comic omnibus? I don't know. It may end up being bonus content for like the first book that's a collection of the podcast scripts or something like that. Because it would, I think, be kind of more relevant there. Either way, it's not going to be wasted work. So we're just adding some dark, and that kind of gives a little bit more definition, say in the hands, feet, paws, whatever you want to call them. Before we go further, so Zamo having been, brainwashing the squirrel. Let's draw the squirrel's eyes as big, glossy. Oh, well, that's weird. That's a little bit more than I want, but it kind of will end up making the squirrel look like he's got black eyes, but it's kind of go there. So that will kind of help get some shape to the face. You give the sense that the squirrel is either insane or brainwashed or something. Anyways, so now we're gonna kind of keep going with this. Before we get too much further, Zamo has a just thought wouldn't it be fun if Zamo had an acorn, and that's what was on the pendulum. I'll finish off the chain after, but I want to finish the squirrel first. But yeah, I think in the podcast years there was wasn't just squirrels. Zamo had like some sort of connection with the neighborhood chickadees. Except Zamo would call them crackadees because they act like they're on crack. So yeah, other kind of animals that Zamo kind of exploits. So let's mix this up. And now let's do the rest of these electrodes coming off, kind of going in different directions, which don't necessarily, if you trace them, don't actually necessarily match up with the other side. In fact, I think there are fewer wires on the right side. Some of these where I probably should have drawn in the wires first. You know, it is what it is. I can always Photoshop that sort of stuff later. This will be another moment. I kind of joke about it sometimes, but it's like, you know, friends from church. Oh, I'd love to see what comics you draw. I'm like, yeah. Well, there's the alcoholic punk rock rat. There's his money grubbing, womanizing half mouse buddy. There's the iguana here who's like brainwashing and doing experiments on neighborhood squirrels. I guess Noah's Archipelago is kind of wholesome by default, by virtue of it not being exactly like my other comics. It will make the background kind of dark. You know, it's a secret basement lab. It's going to be kind of creepy. It has been kind of fun looking back at some of the old Zamo comics, you know, sort of going like, wow, this comic is a lot darker than I remember it being. Anyways. The squirrel looks like the tail is kind of square, but that's okay. We're kind of envisioning that it's folded over, right? All right, so now Zamo is wearing gloves here because, of course, you know, you probably should wear gloves if you're going to handle a squirrel. God only knows where they've been. Zamo certainly doesn't trust that they don't have cooties, you know, mammal cooties. You're given the sense that Zamo's wearing some gloves there. I'm not going to be too detailed. Of course, it's a black and white drawing, so we're not going to see. I was going to say the blue gloves, but I think they make little nitrile gloves in different colors. Obviously, there's the black ones that the tattoo artists all have. I think I've seen hot pink ones, of course the blue ones, kind of the yellowish, whitish kind, etc. The real question is, would they make them in the size for an iguana? Because an iguana's hand is like the size of my thumbnail. But, you know, eBay is a wondrous thing, so perhaps Zamo has found some a good source of gloves on eBay. I think there was a comic many moons ago in which Zamo had a hazmat suit, which was acquired from eBay. So I'm going to draw whatever this gizmo is that Zamo has the squirrel plugged into. And assume it's got a little dial there. Kind of give a fatter outline to that wire. It's funny how it doesn't take much, but even a few of the wires kind of having a thicker outline kind of makes them all go boom, you know, pop. And of course, safety goggles. Gotta have your safety goggles when you're in your secret basement lab doing psychological experiments on squirrels that you found from the neighboring park. It's absolutely pouring rain right now. It's funny, yesterday it was like 31 degrees here, and then overnight I guess the wind finally changed directions to coming from the west again off the Pacific Ocean across the top of Vancouver Island. So the temperature dropped. I mean, it was warm today, but we had several periods where it was I don't normally draw. Iguanas have usually one really big scale at the back of their jowl. I don't normally draw that on Zamo, but, and who knows, maybe I'll determine that I want to Photoshop that out, because normally I would just do the jaw outline. But sometimes it's kind of fun to draw these details that make Zamo look a little more iguana-like. So they do have like these round little spine, not the spiky spines here on the crest, but they do have ones that would be like little hard nubs on the neck. Which, when I was doing Zamo as a webcomic, I pretty much never drew that stuff in. And then, of course, you know, Zamo's wearing a lab coat, so some of these details are going to disappear thanks to the lab coat. Just going to try and show that there is kind of a, you know, the crest continues, I guess would be the way to put it. And then there's that pleat on the lab coat there, either side of the tail. That one's going to look a little weird because I normally have the belly would be coming out like that. And then the legs in the back. So we're just going to go for a leg. And they do have a straight tail. So there's been a few people popping in for a moment and going, what the hell? And dipping out again. It's like, well, I mean, it does say secret basement lab. And then you log in and there's a squirrel being hypnotized with like an acorn on a pendulum by an iguana in a lab coat. And I think there's a certain amount of, I think I'll not watch this. What is going on here type of thing, right? So, anyways, and it's not going to be super obvious. If I was doing this in color, then yeah, then it's obvious that that is Zamo's leg, and then the other leg's going to be right there as well. But it's just going to look a little weird as it is because, you know, Zamo looks a little weird. Zamo would be offended that I just said Zamo looks weird. Zamo looks normal. We look weird. After all, we got this weird stuff growing out of our heads, most of us. You know, we got the funny ears that stick out from there. We got the weird noses that poke out. You know, we don't have, unless you're somebody who has a mohawk, you don't have like this dorsal crest type of thing going on. You know, again, humans are weird. So, now, the main drawing is done. I'm going to show some more gear in the background here. Sort of hidden behind the squirrel. Turn this so I can and grab the crow quill, which hopefully will continue to play nice so I can use it. So I want to write some titles on those books. I think they are supposed to be books. I don't remember now. But let's go. Now this will be something I'm going to have to Squirrel Behavior 101. I'll have to see when I scan it, if I shrink it, does that text stop being readable? Like, I mean, I think in the camera it's not that readable right now. I can read it. But squirrel behavior right now, brain neuroelectrodes, let's see. Just had an idea of what I want. It's almost resting those books on another book that's called Lab Ethics. And the fact that it's kind of being used as, you know, to stack other things on kind of implies Zamo doesn't read the Lab Ethics book or considers it. As the old, there is an old Dilbert gag where Dogbert is doing hypnosis. This is when it was a TV show. And Dogbert's doing hypnosis, and somebody gives him an ethics book. He flips through and goes, this looks pretty optional. Lab Ethics for Dummies. Probably put a little bit of white space around those two kind of swing lines to make them stand out a little bit more. And this area will probably end up being kind of cropped, but I'll just fill it in black anyways. We are coming up on the end of the first hour. And I violated my rule about working from the top down, so we're gonna just keep going with some knobs and stuff here. Zama's ongoing mantra is that things are only illegal or unethical when people do them. You know, all the codes say a person shouldn't do blah, blah, blah. The criminal code says any person who does blah, 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 blah has committed a crime, but it does not say anything about iguanas doing the same sort of behavior, so. I probably will crop too, because if I go all the way off, then I catch it coming back, so I kind of have to stop just a little bit shy of the edge, which means I would probably crop that a couple millimeters out. Imagine's almost saying something along the lines of, "You're getting very sleepy. You are going to do my bidding." you are going to steal, what would Zamo want to steal from the neighbors? You are going to go into the neighbor's yard and steal their strawberries and bring them back to Zamo. I'm going to do a little bit, sometimes a little bit of the heavier nib, especially when we've got a lot of dark areas. It kind of really helps to separate some things. Definitely want to use this sparingly because it can go wrong pretty quickly. It's got a bit of glare in it, but if I pull that back, you can kind of get the sense. Okay, I think we're going to stop that drawing at that point. So there we have Zamo brainwashing the squirrel with the little pendulum of the acorn. And now, next drawing. So, experimenting on squirrels and grow hydroponic berries isn't all that Zamo does down in the secret basement lab. So, let me just shift my camera up a little bit. So if I pulled this down, then it would kind of be interfering with my belly leaning against the table. So, that's not going to focus until I put my first drawings in. So, one of the areas on the map that I'll show. So we've seen the hydroponics treat farm. We've seen, well, down there we've got Georgie's storage, which is the entryway. We've seen the squirrel brainwashing station. So now we're going to do this corner, fun with chemistry. I don't know that I'll end up drawing every single thing, a glimpse of every single area in there. But who knows? Maybe I will. Maybe I'll spend a couple more weeks on this little project. I'm just going to wipe my pen again. So, fun with chemistry. We also have kind of an inaccurate view because we have a few books here, but that, mind you, it doesn't necessarily follow that everywhere that there's books, or that the books can only be in the research library section of the secret basement lab. But anyways, I had some fun earlier looking up like what would be in a beginner's chemistry, beginner's chemistry equipment and whatnot. By the way, if you haven't seen videos by a guy named Nile Red, they're pretty fascinating. I don't know where he works. He does have a pretty cool lab layout. And he's a YouTuber, so maybe he does just have like a warehouse that he set up a chemistry lab in. I don't know the whole lore of the channel, but anyways, it's like one video he did where he's like trying to figure out the stinkiest chemical and like finding rumors about like a stink weapon that the US had. And anyways, of course he made it, and then he tried to get his staff members, like his video editing crew, to sniff it, which is pretty funny. I don't even know, like the thing I'm drawing now, I'm not entirely certain what it is, but there was like a triangle. It looks like they have like long ceramic beads. I'm guessing that's for like heat distribution or something around a Bunsen burner. I don't know. But then I don't know why it has like areas sticking out of it, like these little whatevers pointing out, but perhaps to hold on to some hooks or something to keep. That's okay. That's okay. Actually, that's perfectly fine. Let me use a fatter nib because one of the things that we have here is actually a in-the-wall safe. So a lot of in-the-wall safes, not saves, safes are black. So we're just going to use our pen, or not our pen, our brush, to just smooth out that ink. And we'll put that in the water to soak. So that will dry pretty quickly. Where is... Sometimes I do get, if I'm not paying attention, I do get ink drops like that. So I try and kind of keep an eye on the bottom of the pen, because you can usually tell if there's like a gob of ink starting to build up or not, but wasn't paying attention at that exact moment. So these are like beaker tongs or whatever. Yeah, I was trying to remember, like, because I did take Chemistry 11. So I was like, what did we used to use in the labs? Obviously, you remember like Bunsen burners and whatnot, and pipettes, and yeah, some other like random stuff. I do remember there being like tongs, though. And then this thing is actually like a thermometer, but I think you kind of, it had like a little band around the side that you could move it in and out to kind of note where the heat was on the thermometer. I do remember rubber stoppers were a thing, and that sometimes you had to like push glass pipes through the rubber stopper and somehow have it not break. Got like a little test tube holder thing there. Something's bubbling away here. So there's something or other in those test tubes. So I can flip it upside down and make that into a pegboard. So that'll be kind of easier if I, let's see here. So we got here, so we'd have a hole there, hole there, hole there, that one, hole there, hole there. That one is, something's weird. It's drooping a little low, I guess, but. Not going to be perfectly square, but that's fine. Pegs also, or the peg holes also seem to be kind of spaced out more than you would expect in a pegboard, but then also keep in mind proportionally to us, right? Whereas on an iguana scale, actually, there should be like a hole here and one here, but we're going to ignore that. Let me Photoshop out the extra one there. If one wanted to be exact with it, of course, what you would do would be in the blue underdrawing phase, like get a ruler, mark out the lines and the crisscrossing, just put a dot wherever the lines cross, but ain't nobody got time for that. And by nobody, I mean I don't have time for that, so. Leave it at that point. Now, it's almost got a little test tube cleaning brush there. Put that away. I'm just going to use up that ink. So down here we've got a random box of flasks and beakers and all sorts of random glassware. Not exactly sterile storage, but you know, Zamo probably wouldn't really care that much. I do kind of envision Zamo as like a wannabe alchemist or something like that. You know, Zamo likes gold. After all, dragons always had gold hoards. Zamo is not a dragon, Zamo's an iguana, but you know, Zamo probably figures Zamo deserves some gold, so perhaps Zamo is into alchemy and whatnot. Thinks that there might actually be a way to turn nothing of value into gold, short of a nuclear reactor, because I think you can probably do it in that sense, but let's see. I'm envisioning this as being kind of stainless steel, so I'm going to take the crow quill nib and put in some like fine lines. You know how sometimes steel has that brushed surface? Although I think in labs they usually try to not have that brushed surface because, you know, if you've got ridges and whatnot, that's somewhere that bacteria can congregate, but my plan for these is to scan them at about 600 dpi and then shrink from there. So some of the ultra fine lines add actual print, I don't know. I mean, they'd probably show a little bit, I guess. And see, now we're getting what I'm used to with crow quills, where they don't want to draw. Then it draws too big. Right. So Zamo has these curtains all around now. Who hung up the curtains for Zamo? I don't know. Probably Zamo's minion Hoppy, the bullfrog. You know, curtains are big and heavy and iguanas are lazy, but anyways, you know, they also help with absorbing sound, which would keep Georgie from knowing what Zamo's up to in here. But show like a hook there that's done. But anyways, they also kind of hide and reveal some things. Now here I'm just gonna, because I'm gonna use either the brush or a fatter nib to color in the pen, actually I guess what I usually do with fabric is I will put some line work in there as well. But first, I'm going to add in another detail, which is Zamo has a wall safe in here, which goes back to a comic I did with Zamo, 2007 probably. But Zamo, yeah, my uncle used to always sing this song, and I have no idea the history of it or whatnot. I think it's one of those things that like kids sing type of things, and it's kind of a silly little song, but it's like Jesus puts his money in the Bank of Montreal, Jesus saves, Jesus saves, Jesus saves. So anyways, I had a comic based on that where it's like Zamo going into a bank with dragging like a little wagon loaded with cash, and Zamo singing, Iggy puts her money in the Bank of Montreal, Iggy saves, Iggy saves, Iggy saves. And then the teller explains that, I'm sorry, you can't open an account here because, you know, only humans are allowed to have bank accounts. It's government regulation. You know, after all, you have to have like a social insurance number, or I guess in the States it would be a social security number, whatever. But, you know, only people can get those. So anyways, Zamo was not able to open a bank account. And so the end of the comic shows Zamo having cut open a hole in the drywall in the basement between the studs and hiding the money in there and singing, Zamo puts her money in a hole in the basement wall, Iggy puts her money in a hole in the basement wall, Iggy saves, Iggy saves, Iggy saves. So now we're seeing that the hole in the basement wall has evolved into an actual safe. We are getting some gouging happening on the paper today, but oh well. And then because the curtains are, well, they're probably not actually black, they're probably dark green, but you know, for the purposes of a black and white comic, they're black, and then the safe is black. So using either the brush or a really fatter nib will kind of give a different texture, and that helps to separate them, these two black on black items from each other. Just a little bit more that way. Then a little bit of graffiti that Zamo will have added below. And a little bit of folding for this curtain, and then let's move on to, where is my really fat nib? I think that's it there. Not the fattest nib I have in my collection, but the fattest one that I regularly use. You can see as this one kind of breaks up as it runs out of ink, it does give a bit of a different vibe. Things kind of looking a little trapezoidal there. Hello, Mr. ViewTubing. He says, nice work. Thank you so much. Welcome to the stream. This is sort of some bonus content that goes with an omnibus comic book I'm going to be assembling for my first webcomic that I was doing a long time ago. And the character was a talking iguana named Zamo, who we see in the corner there. And Zamo had a secret basement lab, so that is the context for all of this. There we have that curtain pretty much done. Now we've got some books to draw. I think I'm going to turn it and write in the names with the, I think this is all going to be the little crow quill, if it will cooperate with me. And then we'll write in some titles and then draw them out. Now, one of the ongoing jokes was that Zamo was hoping to take over the world. Although being an iguana, you can imagine the work ethic not really there. So realistically, that was never going to happen. But Zamo has some books about that sort of thing. Also, this comic was started in 2006. So, you know, back in the MySpace era. And there's a whole lot of talk about, say, WMDs and all that sort of stuff. Zamo's plans to acquire WMDs mostly consisted of asking the mall Santa for plutonium every year, but and then getting annoyed when none ever arrived. But and sometimes trying to enact revenge on the mall Santa, which I think it was kind of more actually when I was doing Zamo as a podcast that would come up, I think every so often in the comic years, there would be reference to Zamo having like court-ordered community service. But otherwise, I think that was more of the podcast era. But this section with the Secret Basement Lab will be going at the end of the comic omnibus, and kind of leading into the book after that would be illustrating some of the podcast scripts into short stories. I've got some little bit of something stuck in that quill. Anyways, whatever. As long as it keeps drawing. I always kind of imagine Zamo having all sorts of strange books, but not actually reading them. Ain't nobody got time to actually read stuff, you know. The best thing is that so many people other people will also have books and never read them. So, you know, generally speaking, if you're Zamo, you can just say that the book says whatever. He's going to have to battle with the brain for taking over the world. Yep. Well, you know, that's where the trying to brainwash an army of squirrels would come in, which was doing a little earlier in the stream, illustrating that. Unfortunately, I don't know. I always think that squirrels would probably be pretty susceptible to brainwashing, but then I don't think they would retain any of it. So ultimately a wasted effort, but okay, come on, Crowquill. Sometimes with this particular nib, it's like it doesn't want to start, but once you start it, it will comply eventually. But yeah, when I was doing the Zamo comic more. Zamo wanted to take over the universe, and now, moving on. I think the most ambitious character I have is Miles, the mouse man from my Monday streams. And Miles's ambition is limited to wanting to get onto city council because he hates the mayor and wants to make the mayor's life a living hell. In Miles's defense, the mayor is very corrupt in that world, but ambitions end up becoming a little more, I don't know if manageable is the right word, but a little more modest in terms of ambitions. EYOB and thing that we probably aren't supposed to mention on YouTube, certainly in a live stream, so we just kind of hint at it and leave it. I've heard that they are kind of strict with certain things. And then, of course, someone has to have a copy of the Anarchist Cookbook, although the title gets cut off. I remember back in the early 90s being in like 6th grade, and one of my friends had, a bulletin board thing, very, very early days of that sort of thing. And he would get these, I guess they would have stuff like the Anarchist Cookbook on the bulletin boards. And he'd like print it out. It was like printed out with like a dot matrix printer. And we were all passing it around and thinking we were so cool. In between playing Dungeons and Dragons and eating candy and all that sort of stuff. So here we've got some book titles for Zamo to pretend to read anyways. That also gave this nib a little time to sit in the water and soak, so I find sometimes that helps it not get as clogged up. Now, let's that. So we've got a little wall, edge of the bookcase, whatever. And that's another thing. Zamo is an iguana who is lazy and doesn't build things. So how did Zamo come to have bookshelves in the secret basement lab? Again, possibly the bullfrog Hoppy that Zamo pals around with. And who knows? Some shadows in here. Anything else I want to do in this one? I think I'm going to grab that crow quill and just put in a tiny, kind of like I did a little bit of a brushed steel texture on the workbench. Let's put in a little bit of like a wood texture into the bookshelf. Kind of like leaning back to squint and determine if I need anything else. But I think that one is good. Now, I've got 20 minutes to go. I'm going to start this bottom one and we may end up running over. So one of the other areas Zamo has in the secret basement lab, and I will bring out the diagram again, is, so now we've drawn Georgie's storage, which is this first one. We've drawn the squirrel brain, well, last week we did the hydroponic berry farm. Earlier today we did the squirrel brainwashing, the acorn pendulum squirrel brainwashing station. And now we've drawn the Fun with Chemistry corner and the International Bank of Zamo. So now what we're going to draw next is this surveillance zone and TV watching. So Zamo has acquired somewhere a whole bunch of like old televisions, the kind of thing that might be left on the sidewalk as a free take it weighs a ton, we don't want it anymore kind of a thing. So Zamo calls it chimp watch because, you know, humans do share like 97-98% of our DNA with chimpanzees. So Zamo, as far as Zamo is concerned, as an iguana, that means that we are chimps as far as she's concerned. She insists that iguanas are actually T-Rex, sharing 98% of DNA with T-Rex. And anyone who says otherwise, well, they're lying as far as Zamo's concerned. So, anyways, so we have the Chimp Watch station. Kind of a knockoff of Crime Watch, I guess, except who's going to give Zamo a prize for keeping an eye on all the humans and their, well, in theory, bad behavior, in reality, probably boring behavior. So some of these TVs are going to have views of the neighbors and whatnot, and some of them are just going to be, you know, general surveillance monitoring. So first one actually that we're going to draw does not have a human at all. It's the camera on it is aimed at Hoppy, who is the bullfrog who Zamo has either brainwashed or the bullfrog just came up with this on his own into thinking that Zamo is the Messiah or some sort of a superior supreme being. So Hoppy hangs out in the yard in the neighborhood pond with the other frogs, but also in like the backyard pond of Zamo's pet human Georgie. So at first we got to draw the actual vintage TV. So it's got one of those, you know, where they have the kind of where it's kind of framed and dips into the cathode ray tube. I will say, you know, obviously picture quality is far better on TVs now than back in the day, but the old TVs kind of, they just looked cool. And the one that kind of inspired this had a lot of buttons instead of dials, so. I think we're getting to that point in the evening where the nibs are a little clogged, but oh well. So you gotta have your fake wood grain on a vintage TV, because they all have that. Of course, Hoppy is after some flies. And the crow quill again for this kind of a crosshatchy area that was like a fiber fabric kind of a thing. It's funny, I've been doing pen and ink illustration, working on various, web comics and stuff like that. With this medium for, well, I guess since the Zamo comic launched in 2006 and probably a couple years before then. And I have never quite gotten the hang of crow quills until like literally this week. So otherwise it's like, oh, I don't know, it won't frickin' draw. So it just goes to show there's always something new to learn in whatever your art medium is. But it does definitely seem to be a bit of a Goldilocks thing that you need to have a certain amount of pressure, else like nothing happens. But if you press too hard, then the prongs of the nib come apart and nothing happens. So, oh, there's our first TV and stuff around them, but we're gonna keep plugging away. So this one, the reference image was one that must have been a portable because it had like a big handle on the top. Now, I mean, think about portable with like cathode ray tubes. That must have sucked. Freaking heavy, although it's probably only like a 12-inch TV, so. But even so, those get to be pretty heavy. Just put some like straight up shadow in behind there. So this TV is trained on Zamo's pet human Georgie's boyfriend Wilhelm, who fancies himself a romantic poet, as you can kind of already tell by the hair. Now, Wilhelm does not live with Georgie and never has, but someone may have managed to get a camera into possibly Wilhelm's apartment, probably his office. draw these as those, kind of the 90s style torchère floor lamps in the background. And then the next one over. This one is just monitoring the corner. Georgie's house is on a corner lot in the suburbs of Vancouver. And this TV, its video feed is coming from a view of the corner. I guess the better for Zamo to know who's coming over to visit. Or to keep an eye out for the Amazon truck. Or to run out and acquire whatever Zamo bought on Georgie's credit card before Georgie can find it and start asking questions about what the hell is this. Fill this in shadow underneath. Actually, this, I think, is a job for the crow quill again. At least this part. And we'll just fill in the black of the asphalt on the road. Probably also be where Zamo monitors to see if Georgie leaves the house when Georgie's coming back. So Zamo has a couple minutes head time of hiding whatever Zamo's been up to, so as to not lose one's TV privileges. Now, this TV is going to be monitoring the garden. You know, gotta keep an eye out on when things look ripe or not necessarily ripe, but, you know, tender and ready to be munched on. Iguanas being herbivores after all. Let's fatten up those outlines a little bit. This one, the reference image, I swear it looked kind of almost like a bread box, but... And a bunch of these, like, when I was looking for, like, old retro TVs, a bunch of them, the cases were, like, red plastic or whatnot. I'm like, we don't have red TVs now. We used to be a proper country. Anyways, speaking of ones that are kind of shaped a little bit like bread boxes, this is another one. This one, I don't know if that was like the volume slider, but it had like a little triangle on it and like a slot. So this one, Zamo is watching the neighbor, Mrs. Churchman. And instead of going for a crow quill, I'm going to assume that this TV is kind of poor quality and a little blotchy almost. But Mrs. Churchman is watering her rose bushes. And Zamo enjoys eating the roses off the rose bushes. And the next TV is one of those like VHS and TV combos. Always wanted to get one of those back in the day, and then always spent my allowance on something else. Saved it up and then used it for other stuff instead, but this is where sometimes they were like, the TV was only like that big. And Zamo is using it also to monitor the garden. To assume the picture quality on this one is not very good, so we'll kind of make things bigger in terms of like dots and kind of like vaguer. And then this TV, whether it's another neighbor or perhaps almost just watching, I guess YouTube existed back then, but like exotic garden stuff. Could be somebody else in the neighborhood because in Vancouver's zone 8, so you could definitely grow things like hibiscuses, which is what this is going to show. I mean, I live in zone 7B and I have several hardy hibiscus plants in my garden. So you could absolutely grow those in Vancouver, which is actually warmer. And that's kind of a nod to, I had an iguana for many years, like 10, yeah, about 10 years. And whenever we had like hibiscus plants, like as house plants, she would eat them, and she would eat the flowers first. So could definitely see if one of the neighbors has a hibiscus plant, Zamo would be monitoring that to determine when it's best to go out and chew on it. Oh. We got some really old TVs because they have bunny ears on them. And in this drawing, perhaps it's summertime. Zamo has a camera trained at the cherry tree in order to know when to go out and raid that. You know, important information. Well, the stuff you really need to know about the state of the world. We still have a few minutes left to go to finish off this drawing, but I will just kind of say what I'm going to do with this stream, just like I do with pretty much all my streams, is after it's actually I was going to say, no, pardon me, kind of forgetting that with the OBS streams, it does automatically stay public, but I think YouTube takes about 18 hours to process the video into high qualities. So I'm actually going to make the stream private once I finish so that it can do its processing thing. And then tomorrow afternoon, I will make it public again. And then the rest of the week's streaming plan is tomorrow night. I am streaming from my phone again, so vertical stream instead of this style. And that will be working on coloring book pages for my Noah's Archipelago project. And this is a big old, oh yeah, that's okay. For a second I forgot, like, why is there such a huge speaker? This one I think is one where it was like a boom box incorporated with the TV in the middle. It was kind of a weird one. Anyways, so the stream will be public again tomorrow afternoon for anybody wanting to catch up. And I will also have like a little thanks for watching thing at the end, and because you know you kind of do the end screen thing So I will connect that to the Zamo the Destroyer playlist on here. So anybody wanting to catch up on other Zamo streams, they can do that. And I think I jumped around from one thing to the other. Oh yeah, so tomorrow's stream is my other comic project, Noah's Archipelago, with the coloring book we're working on, the A to Z of Noah's Jobs. By the way, what I'm doing here on this screen, Zamo is spying on her pet human, Georgie, who is a fine art painter. Zamo would argue the fine art thing, but Georgie is supposed to actually be a professional painter, painting abstract, whatever. Anyways, so tomorrow on Thursday, we are streaming Noah's Archipelago. Friday, we are back with the Rats for a couple more pages of Ricky B. Goes to Sea. Here we'll give Georgie Plumber's butt. Why not? And a huge paintbrush. And then on Monday, we are going to be streaming Miles Morrow's Pursuit of Happiness. It's going to be the X spread. I've been going through the letters of the alphabet, doing a couple drawings or a couple pages per. So we are getting super close to the end of the current phase of that project. And then Tuesday, I will be streaming Noah's Archipelago for what was originally a 2026 calendar project, but it's actually turned out to be going to do it as a book of days, so it'll be a book project. And that's actually full color marker stuff. So anyways, that's kind of what's going on with the upcoming streams, and this one as well. Next week, I'm going to see, I think we're going to do 2 more drawings for Zamo's Secret Basement Lab next week, and then that will, then we will be finished. Not only the Zamo's Secret Basement Lab, will actually be finished with the book project that this is going into. Well, it depends. If it goes into the Zamo omnibus, then we are finished the Zamo omnibus. If I decide that I'm going to save it for a later book, well, obviously, we're not done the later book yet. But we are making progress. For the Zamo omnibus, aside from these drawings, basically, I've just got to spend a bunch of time with my scanner, because back in the day, a big, there's just some random person on a bicycle that's almost spying on. Back in the day, of course, a big image for the internet was like 600 pixels high, but print resolution is like 300 pixels per inch, so that you can imagine that doesn't fly. I have all the old Zamos, but I have them physical copies. So I will have to scan all of those, as well as bonus cartoons such as these, and then work on it in InDesign. But yeah, I'm definitely going to do 2 more drawings, I think, next Wednesday for Zamo's Secret Basement Lab. I'm just going to add some more shadows in here. And then we will reevaluate, then we will be done the Secret Basement Lab, which I'm pretty sure means we are done the Zamo Omnibus for drawing, and I have to just start scanning and getting that ready, because I would like to have that book out this fall. Because this project Zamo, I started in the MySpace days 20 years. So it's the 20-year anniversary of Zamo the Destroyer. And it would be kind of nice to finally do a Zamo book. So I've got to get cracking on that so that I can have it out, in the fall. But in terms of the stream, after next week, we will still be working on Zamo on Wednesdays. But I have a different project involving Zamo. It'll be a short story that was actually at one point a podcast episode, like an hour-long one called The World According to Zamo. And I think I'm going to illustrate that, and then it'll be like a newsletter sign-up kind of idea. So anyways, there's the last TV is Zamo spying on cars driving by, I guess. When I had a pet iguana, her cage, she had a huge cage that was in my living room, and she loved looking out the window, looking at cars go by. Just like never seemed to get bored of that. So do I want to add any, I'm just looking and going, do I want to add any fatter pen work? I think, no, I don't. So let's have a review of what we have done so far today. Well, today. So I started off showing, this is the map of Zamo is a iguana, so like that Zamo there. And Zamo's pet human has this split level house. So, and her name is Georgie. So Georgie has the rec room as her painting studio, and then this area is like a 4-foot crawl space. It's based on a house some of my relatives had for like, I don't know, 15, 20 years. So there's like a 4-foot tall crawl space underneath the living room, dining room, kitchen with some little columns that, or a pony wall or something holding it up. So Zamo has commandeered this storage space because that's what it was. She left this little corner for Georgie to keep Christmas stuff and whatnot, and then the rest is Zamo's secret basement lab. We did this drawing last week, and that is the storage space, and then it's curtained off, no humans beyond this point. And then last week we did the hydroponic berry growing farm in one corner. And then we started off today with the squirrel brainwashing area. Zamo has this idea about taking over the world and wanted to build an army of brainwashed squirrels to do her bidding. Squirrels, I suspect, are easy to brainwash, but they don't really retain anything, so this wouldn't really do much. But there's Zamo in a lab coat with a little acorn on a pendulum and a whole bunch of gizmos and brain electrodes and all that. So that was the first major drawing we did today. And then we drew Zamo's Fun with Chemistry corner and the wall vault known as the International Bank of Zamo. And then a few books, some light reading like WMDs for Fun and Profit, Go Nuclear Chemistry 101, and the little chemistry area. And then what we just finished up with was the Chimp Watch Station, Zamo's surveillance system, comprised of old TVs that were found on the side of the road being thrown away that are being used to monitor the various characters. So that's Hoppy, the bullfrog, who kind of worships Zamo. Hoppy's out catching flies. Georgie's boyfriend, Wilhelm, is staring at his laptop. We have some garden pics where Zamo is monitoring to know when to go and raid things out of the garden. The neighbor watering her rose bushes, because Zamo likes to eat the roses. The corner intersection, so Zamo knows when people are coming over. The pet human Georgie doing some painting. The cherry tree, some car driving by, some cyclists driving by. So that's gonna be it for this week's show. I guess this is as good a time as any to throw that one on. Please subscribe if you're enjoying it, and if you've made it this far, well, if you've made it through any part of the show, thank you for watching. And if you're enjoying it, subscribe, like the rats say. By the way, on the left, that's Ricky. We will be drawing some Ricky stuff on Friday, and Miles, we will be drawing Miles stuff on Monday. So I always forget, I actually have, when I start saying thank you for watching, I have a screen that says thank you for watching. And then we see Ricky and Miles. We also see Ursula down there in the pink sweater and her old man Noah. We will be working on Noah and Ursula in tomorrow night's stream with some coloring book. Well, more Noah, I think. The coloring book is the A to Z of Noah's job history. So that's what we're working on tomorrow. And yeah, we will next week on Wednesday, like I said, we will have a couple more drawings from Zamo's Secret Basement Lab to wrap up this this project. But then the week after, we will be starting a new Zamo project. And we'll talk about that more then. So what I'm going to leave you all with in the last 30 seconds, you know, when YouTube does the recommended video thing, is I will leave you with the playlist for Zamo the Destroyer, so you can check out more Zamo streams if you're new and want to catch up and whatnot. And yeah, I stream every night, Monday to Friday, at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. And I just remembered, actually, next week, there isn't going to be a Zamo stream next week because I have an event I have to go to on Wednesday night. So the next Zamo stream, when we're going to wrap up the Zamo's Secret Basement Lab, is 2 weeks from today. And I'll have to make sure I update that in the video description as well. But 2 weeks from tonight, we will have another Zamo stream. I've been saying all week, next week, blah, 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 and I totally blanked. But anyways, so in a couple weeks, we will finish up Zamo's Secret Basement Lab. But apart from that, I'm generally speaking, I am streaming here on different projects Monday to Friday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. So thank you for watching. Tune in again real soon. And here is the subscribe button and the link to the Zamo the Destroyer playlist if you want to check out more about this obnoxious little iguana who has the Secret Basement Lab. See you soon. Bye.